Bikes have been a part of customization beginning in Mario Kart Wii, and since have been brought to Mario Kart 8. Most of you have probably already noticed that these bikes function in a very different way compared to karts. So today, I'll be looking at bikes and analyzing them to understand and compare them to karts. Although I'll be looking at bikes in general, for the purposes of simplicity, this video will be focusing on bikes in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe specifically. But without further delay, let's get this analysis rolling. The biggest and most commonly known difference between karts and bikes is the way the two drift. There are two types of drifting in Mario Kart. Outside drifting, which applies to all karts and some bikes, and inside drifting, which applies to 5 out of the 9 karts, which are the Comet, Sport Bike, Jet Bike, Yoshi Bike, and finally, the Master Cycle. Understanding the difference between the two is what will allow you to make decisions as to whether you want to use a kart or bike when you're playing online. So let's start with outside drifting, as it's simply just easier to understand. Outside drifting is what most players are used to, and it allows you to have great control over your drift and swiftly change from making large turns to tight turns, or vice versa. They also have the benefit of allowing you to easily realign yourself by continuously pressing the L or R trigger if you happen to mess up on a turn and want to center yourself without too much effort on your part. In general, it's a pretty simple concept to understand, which makes sense considering it's what's been used since the original Mario Kart on the SNES. Inside drift, on the other hand, has more depth to it. To begin with, when you're using it, you'll notice that the amount of control you have over your bike is lower, especially when it comes to taking tight turns. That's because bikes take a longer time to actually begin to take a tight turn. Knowing this, you want to begin drifting earlier than you normally would in order to align yourself and get past that turn. And although this factor does make drifting more of a pain in some cases, its slow startup gives it a large advantage when taking turns that extend over a period of time, such as the turn in Mario Circuit. Don't get it wrong, bikes can make tight turns. The issue is that they only function their best when the course you're on has gentle turns. Also, keep in mind that bikes have high acceleration, mini turbostats, and less weight in general, which makes driving feel lighter than using a kart. So if you're looking to use a combo that doesn't feel too clunky, a bike might just be what you want. Something that's also worth noting is that aligning yourself on a bike can be much more tedious than on a kart, and this is especially the case in 200cc, as you simply spamming the trigger button to hop back into place won't cut it. So keep that in mind when you're going for risky plays. They could have potentially serious consequences. Now from this point on, we'll be looking at different clips of time trials I did in order to get a better understanding of what I've been saying this whole time. Beginning with Peach's Garden, I experimented with both the Teddy Buggy and the Comet to see how both would perform, and right away, the difference was felt on the very first turn. Because of how spacious the track was, the turns on the bike were so immediate that I drove straight into the water. And in case you were wondering, no, turning your joystick in the opposite direction of your turn does not help in making wider turns. Something you'll realize if you're new to using bikes is that once you start a drift, you're practically locked into it. So if you drift even a bit too early, chances are you'll end up on the off-road. But continuing on, towards the area with the statues, I tried to replicate what was done on the Teddy Buggy and take advantage of the large spades to get some mini turbos, but it ended in utter disaster to say the least. Basically, if you're in an area where it doesn't look like you need to drift, probably don't, or you could end up like me and run into walls. But before we continue on, I just want to mention that although I am making this video, this by no means means that I am a pro when it comes to inside drifting, and a lot of the footage you're seeing right now took 2 to 3 tries, with the first one being me just falling off the track repeatedly. Anyways, back to the analysis. One thing I noticed throughout my trials is that collecting coins that are around a curve is a hell of a lot easier to do, which goes back to what I said earlier about being locked into a drift. Drifting at the right time is the key to driving efficiently with bikes, and even though that sounds like the most basic line you've ever heard, it truly is the case when it comes to bikes, since you can't correct yourself if you mess up. Now when it comes to taking shortcuts, it can be a little tough at first to figure out where you want to position yourself to leverage the shortcut as much as possible, which you can see with the clip on screen. As I came across this little shortcut on lap 3, I tried to position myself in a manner where I could start a drift before taking the cut and release it after, like I did on the left. But I quickly realized this wouldn't work due to the bike's different drifting, so I stayed on the road and waited for the right time. There probably was a better way to take that shortcut, but at that moment I decided to take it safe. Now we'll be taking a look at a more technical track with narrow roads. In other words, a medium difficulty track for bikes, Ninja Hideaway. This track was definitely a step up in difficulty, and my first run was just a lot of me falling off the track, but it provided me with a lot of information on how to tackle different turns. You'll notice that in the first clip, I ended up falling off the track while trying to go up to the second floor because I was drifting for far too long. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said that bikes can take tight turns. It just takes longer to actually happen, and why roads with gentle turns work much better for them. I realized this and made sure to release my drift earlier in the next lap. The other thing I wanted to mention on Ninja Hideaway is the second to last turn of the course. It actually gave me quite a few issues, as I would often just end up driving off. This is one of the areas where karts have a large advantage. Because I'm able to have so much control over my drift, I'm able to make my turn tighter right before trick jumping off the bump. And yet, I couldn't do the same for the bike. I'm not sure if this is because my turn wasn't early enough, or because I shouldn't have tricked off the bump at all. But if anybody does know, feel free to leave a comment down below. But for our final track comparison, we'll be heading over to one of the worst track for bikes, Dragon Driftway. To say this track is a pain in my butt is an understatement. I mean, I had to use brake drifting in 150cc. Like, that should honestly tell you all you need to know about this track. But let's jump into the biggest issue here, the turns. The unbelievably tight turns, especially at the beginning. And not only that, but it's the fact that they're consecutive. There's no time to try and get back into place. So if you mess up at the beginning, it practically throws off the rest of that section. The second half of that track actually isn't that bad, considering how detrimental the first half is. But there's also another enemy in this track, the camera. I'm not sure why, but making turns close to walls with a bike just leads to overall less vision in the front, but more vision behind you. And I know you guys are probably saying something along the lines of, but zombie, part of the gameplay isn't visible. Of course it's hard to see. Just hear me out. Even while I was getting the footage for this video, I could barely see where I was going, which led to me basically guessing where I had to stop drifting. Aside from those two factors, there wasn't really much else to the track. Except for our good old pal 200cc. That's right. If you thought this track wasn't hard enough, try playing this track with an inside drift bike on 200cc. For this one, there won't even be editing. Just pure, raw footage of me getting bodied in Dragon Driftway on 200cc. Enjoy. Yeah, let's just say Lakitu became my best friend while I was on that track. But anyway, that's all the information I can give you for bikes in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I hope this video was able to provide you with some insight on how bikes work. And please, if there's something I didn't mention in the video, leave a comment to help me and others. But if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and maybe even subscribe, eh? See you on the next one. Bye!